The ivory roses trembled in Clara Whitmore's hands as she stood before the tall oak doors of her oceanfront estate, their petals glowing softly beneath the fading light of the Atlantic coast. After 3 exhausting days at Mass General Hospital, where she had been recovering from emergency surgery, Clara longed for nothing more than the comfort of her own bed and a quiet evening with her husband Ethan and their 10-year-old daughter Lily. That morning, a bouquet of roses had arrived at the hospital with a handwritten note in Ethan's familiar script. "Welcome home, my love. Our sanctuary awaits you." Those words had carried her through the final hours of recovery, filling her with hope that tonight would mark a gentle return to normalcy. The brass handle felt cool beneath her palm as Clara pushed the door open and stepped into the marble foyer. Crystal chandeliers scattered prisms of light across walls adorned with her architectural awards and Lily's paintings. For a moment the house seemed unchanged, yet an odd energy lingered in the air. "Ethan?" she called softly. "Lily?" Silence answered her, broken only by faint laughter drifting from upstairs. Clara smiled, imagining Ethan and Lily had planned some surprise to welcome her home. She climbed the sweeping staircase, her body still tender from surgery, one hand gliding along the polished banister, while the other clutched the roses. Tarisiu, laughter grew louder, now mixed with voices. One of them Ethan's deep baritone, the other feminine and intimate. Clara slowed, confusion tightening in her chest. At the end of the hallway, the master bedroom door stood ajar, golden light spilling. Out onto the Persian runner. She edged closer, her pulse racing. "Ethan," she called again. The door swung open. The sight that greeted her shattered 13 years of trust in a single heartbeat. Ethan lay tangled in silk sheets with Sabrina Hale, the glamorous interior designer who had remodeled their Cape Cod summer home. Sabrina's platinum hair spilled across Clara's pillows while Ethan's hands traced lines on skin that was not his wife's. The roses slipped from Clara's numb fingers, scattering across the hardwood floor like snow. Ethan's head jerked toward her, his face draining of color. "Clara," he stammered, fumbling for the sheets. Sabrina, however, showed no shame. Rising gracefully from the bed, she gathered her clothes with deliberate slowness, her icy blue eyes meeting Clara's, with triumph. "Hello, Clara," she said coolly. "Ethan mentioned you might be home today." The words struck harder than a slap. They revealed planning, anticipation, a relationship nurtured during Clara's absence. This was no fleeting mistake. This was betrayal inside her own sanctuary. Clara's knees threatened to give way, the weakness from surgery colliding with heartbreak. She clutched the doorframe for balance, her chest tightening as if the hospital monitors still attached beneath her blouse were screaming warnings her body could no longer ignore. "How long?" she whispered. Ethan scrambled into his clothes, his movements frantic. "Clara, please let me explain." "How long?" she repeated, louder this time, her voice steadier even as her body trembled. Sabrina stepped closer, fully dressed now, her tone sharp and cruel. "Does it really matter?" Ethan finally realized what he needs. Someone who understands his ambitions, someone who isn't buried in blueprints and construction projects. The words cut deeper than a blade. Clara's heart cracked in two, but fury burned through her, grief. "Get out," she said hoarsely. "Clara, please." Ethan started, but she silenced him with a voice that carried unshakable authority. "Get out of my house, both of you!" Sabrina slung her purse over her shoulder, but not before leaning close enough for her whisper to sear into Clara's soul. "He was never truly yours. Men like Ethan need women who match their fire. Thank you for keeping him busy until the right one came along." Clara stumbled backward into the hallway, vision blurring as Ethan's desperate voice faded behind her. She slid down the wall, surrounded by the fallen roses, their bruised petals symbolizing every dream she had ever believed in. Through the window, the Atlantic stretched gray beneath gathering storm clouds. As darkness closed around her, Clara's final thought was not of Ethan or Sabrina, but of Lily, her daughter, who would soon walk into a home forever changed. The Call reached Margaret Whitmore at exactly 11:37 p.m., slicing through the stillness of her Boston penthouse like a blade. "Mrs. Whitmore," came the voice of a nurse from Mass General Hospital. "Your daughter Clara has been readmitted. She collapsed at home but is stable now. She's asking for you." Margaret was 62, a federal judge who had weathered courtroom storms, political battles, and the death of her husband while raising Clara alone. Yet something in the nurse's carefully neutral tone told her this was more than a medical setback. Within 20 minutes, she was on the road, her midnight blue Bentley cutting through the darkness of the Massachusetts Turnpike. City lights blurred in her rearview mirror as she sped toward Boston, her hands gripping the leather wheel, her mind racing with scenarios, each darker than the last. Clara had been bright and hopeful that very morning, excited to come home after surgery. Something terrible had happened. By dawn, Margaret reached the hospital. The sky glowed rose and gold above the Atlantic as she hurried through sterile hallways, until she found Clara in a private room. Monitors beeped softly in the background, but it was her daughter's face that struck her, once vibrant, now pale, carved in stone. "Sweetheart," Margaret whispered, lowering herself into the chair. Beside the bed, Clara's eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus. "Mama," she whispered, the childhood name breaking through years of formality. He was with her, in our bed, in our home. The words needed no explanation. Margaret's suspicions about Ethan Whitmore, her son-in-law, crystallized into certainty. From the day Clara introduced him, she had sensed charm masking emptiness, ambition hiding weakness. Now the truth had surfaced, cruel and undeniable. "Tell me everything," Margaret said firmly. Her voice carried the same authority that once silenced courtrooms. Clara's words came in fragments, halting but sharp. The roses, the laughter, the betrayal, the blonde woman, Sabrina Hale, and her cruel declaration that Ethan was never really Clara's. With each revelation, Margaret felt her protective instincts sharpen into steel. "And Lily?" she asked when Clara finished. "Ethan's sister took her when the ambulance came." "She doesn't know yet," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "How do I tell my daughter that her family is a lie?" Margaret clasped her daughter's hand, cold despite the warmth of the room. "You tell her the truth carefully with love, but first you let this betrayal become the best thing that ever happened to you." Clara's dark eyes flickered with disbelief. "What do you mean?" Margaret rose, her gaze sweeping the horizon outside the window where the Boston skyline caught the morning sun. "Ethan Whitmore just made the gravest mistake of his life. He underestimated the women in this family. Your great-grandmother built a hotel empire after her husband abandoned her. Your grandmother turned her divorce settlement into a communications fortune. And I built a career in law after betrayal nearly broke me. He thinks he chose strength in Sabrina. He is about to discover how wrong he is." Clara struggled to sit up, confusion etched across her face. "I don't understand." "You will," Margaret said, turning back to her. "But for now you must heal, not just from surgery, but from the illusion that you ever needed Ethan to complete you. You are Clara Whitmore, one of Boston's most respected architects. You designed projects that earned international acclaim. You are the daughter of a federal judge and the mother of a remarkable little girl who inherited your strength. Ethan and Sabrina think they've destroyed you. What they've really done is set you free." "I don't feel free," Clara admitted. Her voice trembled. "I feel broken." "Broken things can be rebuilt stronger than before," Margaret said. "Ask any architect." Just then, the door opened. A nurse wheeled in a breakfast tray, followed closely by a small figure who ran straight to Clara's bedside. It was Lily, still in her purple pajamas from Ethan's sister's house. She climbed onto the bed, wrapping herself around her mother. "Mama, why are you here again? Aunt Rebecca said you got sick, but you look sad, not sick." Margaret studied her granddaughter with new eyes. There was wisdom in Lily's gaze, the protectiveness of a child who understood more than she should. This wasn't just Ethan's daughter. She was a Whitmore girl in the making. Clara smoothed her daughter's hair. "Sometimes grown-ups face Things that make them sad. Is it about Daddy and that blonde lady? Lily asked, her voice soft but piercing. The silence stretched. Margaret felt her chest tighten. Clara's lips parted, struggling for words, but Lily went on. She comes when you're at work. She drives a white car. Daddy said she was decorating, but she never brought anything. Margaret and Clara exchanged a look that needed no words. Ethan's betrayal had been deeper, longer, and more reckless than Clara had feared. Their child had seen it all. How long, sweetheart? Margaret asked gently. Since before Christmas. She even came to my birthday party, but she left when you got home early. 6 months, maybe longer. Margaret's resolve crystallized. This wasn't just infidelity. It was invasion, corruption, deception witnessed by their child. Lily, she said softly, would you like to stay with Mama and me for a while? Just the three of us? The little girl's face brightened instantly. Like a sleepover that never ends? Exactly like that, Margaret said, her gaze meeting Clara's with silent promise. As Lily chatted about adventures to come, Margaret's mind sharpened. Ethan had chosen his battlefield, but he would soon learn he'd picked the wrong family. The game had just begun. The morning sun streamed through the wide windows of Clara Whitmore's hospital room, casting long patterns across the sterile floor. 3 generations sat together, bound by blood and by betrayal. Clara reclined against crisp white pillows, her daughter Lily nestled protectively at her side, her small hand gripping her mother's gown as if she could anchor her to safety. At the foot of the bed, Margaret Whitmore sat upright in the visitor's chair, silver hair glinting like a crown, her posture as commanding as it had ever been in court. For a while, silence reigned. The steady rhythm of the monitors filled the room until Margaret finally spoke. We need to discuss what happens next. Finances, custody, and most importantly, how we shield this child from the storm that's coming. Clara nodded, her mind already dividing the crisis into parts as if it were a new architectural project. Ethan and I share everything: accounts, property, custody. Untangling it will be brutal. Not for long, Margaret replied, her tone carrying decades of legal authority. I've already contacted Margaret Chen, the best family attorney in Boston. She owes me favors. We'll have immediate action. Mother, I can't. I'm not ready for divorce proceedings, Clara whispered. You don't have the luxury of waiting, Margaret answered firmly. Lily saw more than you realize. This wasn't one mistake. Ethan and Sabrina were plotting their future while you were building cultural landmarks and recovering from surgery. They've been strategic. We must be smarter. Lily stirred and blinked up at them, catching fragments of adult conversation. Are we going home now? Clara smoothed her daughter's hair. Soon, sweetheart, we're just making sure everything is safe first. But home doesn't feel safe anymore, Lily murmured, her young voice steady with truth. It feels different. Margaret reached for her granddaughter's hand. That's because it is different. But different can become stronger. A knock interrupted them, and Dr. Patricia Harris, Clara's surgeon, entered with a smile. Mrs. Whitmore, your latest tests are excellent. You're recovering well, no complications. Medically, you're free to go home. Thank you, Clara replied, though her tone lacked joy. After the doctor left, Margaret rose and walked to the window, gazing across the Atlantic coast. You're afraid to return, she said without turning. Wouldn't you be? Clara's voice cracked. Every room feels poisoned. 13 years of memories are ruined. Lily sat up straighter, watching them both. If Daddy did something bad, does that mean he won't live with us anymore? Margaret and Clara exchanged a glance heavy with meaning. Finally, Clara spoke, softly. Things will be different, darling. But your father will always be your father. You'll still see him. Lily frowned in thought. Different doesn't mean worse, right? It just means new. Yes, Margaret said, impressed by her granddaughter's clarity. Sometimes new is better. Another knock signaled the nurse returning with discharge papers and a wheelchair. We're ready whenever you are, Mrs. Whitmore. Margaret took the papers, her expression resolute. We'll need a few minutes, then we'll go home. Together. Clara looked from her mother to her daughter. Broken but unbowed, betrayed but not defeated, she realized they had just formed a new alliance. 3 hearts, 1 mission. And Ethan Whitmore had no idea what storm he had unleashed. By afternoon, Margaret's Bentley rolled up the circular drive of the Whitmore estate. The limestone facade looked as perfect as ever in the late summer sun, the manicured gardens blooming with roses Clara herself had planted. Yet the house no longer felt like home. To Lily, peering from the back seat, it looked more like a museum, beautiful but lifeless. Ethan's silver Porsche was gone, replaced by silence. Margaret's attorney had worked swiftly, securing Clara temporary exclusive occupancy. Ethan would spend his nights in a hotel, far from the home he had corrupted. Inside, the marble foyer sparkled under chandeliers, but Clara froze. Scattered near the baseboards were the withered petals of the roses she had dropped the day before. The very moment her world shattered, she stooped and gathered them into her palm, their bruised edges proof that something once beautiful had decayed beyond saving. From the kitchen, Lily's voice carried. "Grandma, should we have chamomile tea? Mama likes it when she's sad." Clara followed and found Margaret calmly setting out cups, her movements precise, grounding. "Lily tells me the garden is magnificent," Margaret said. "She thinks you should spend time there. Healing begins in the earth." Clara hesitated, then looked through the glass doors at her pride and joy. A garden she had designed as a legacy, filled with climbing roses, jasmine, and carefully arranged spaces. She hadn't walked there since before surgery. The 3 of them stepped outside. The air smelled of roses and salt from the Atlantic. Lily darted ahead to her favorite gazebo where she often sketched. "Look, Mama," she called. "Mrs. Patterson picked the dead flowers just like you taught me." Clara's heart swelled at the care their neighbor had shown. The garden flourished, untouched by betrayal, waiting patiently for her return. They settled at a wrought iron bench. Margaret poured tea, her eyes sweeping across the blooms. "You created something timeless here, Clara. Don't let Ethan's choices take it from you." As Clara sipped, Lily came running back, holding a small leather journal. "I found this under the bench. Is it yours?" Clara frowned. The binding was unfamiliar. She opened it and froze. The handwriting was not hers. The first entry read, March 15th. Clara works late on Tuesdays. Perfect for longer visits. Her hands trembled as she flipped through. The pages were filled with observations, written in Sabrina Hale's careful script. Dates, times, details about their routines, notes about Clara's work schedule, comments about Lily, even drawings of the estate. Margaret leaned closer, her judicial mind already dissecting the evidence. This isn't just an affair. This is surveillance, planning. She treated your life like a blueprint to dismantle. Lily sat cross-legged on the grass, reading aloud another entry. She says Mama cries when Daddy leaves. That's not true. Mama reads books and makes plans. Her young voice carried indignation. She doesn't even know us. Clara felt tears burn her eyes as she listened. Through her daughter's innocent defense, the truth rang clear. Sabrina had misunderstood everything. She had seen shadows, not substance. She had mistaken strength for neglect, independence for distance, love for weakness. She doesn't understand us at all, Lily said firmly. She thinks she won Daddy, but she lost the best part. She lost us. Margaret rose, her voice cutting through the warm garden air with precision. Then we will use her own arrogance against her. This journal is evidence, premeditation, manipulation, and stalking. She handed us the weapon that will undo her. Clara pressed the journal to her chest, her heart pounding. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt something other than grief. She felt fire. In the garden she had built for the future, surrounded by her mother and her daughter, Clara realized that Sabrina had made her greatest mistake. She had underestimated the Whitmore women, and that miscalculation would cost her everything. Morning sunlight streamed into the master bedroom of the Whitmore estate. spilling across the French doors and falling on the bed where Clara sat, her body stronger now but her spirit still fragile. Margaret stood inside the walk-in closet, surveying row upon row of Clara's carefully arranged wardrobe, navy suits, tailored jackets, neutral dresses. "You've always had exquisite taste," Margaret observed, her hand brushing the fabric. "But most of this, it's muted. Conservative. Tell me honestly, Clara, how much of this is for you and how much of it was for Ethan?" Clara paused, realizing her mother was right. She had spent years dressing to fit Ethan's image of the perfect wife, polished, elegant but never daring enough to overshadow him. Before she could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway, struggling to carry a small cedar chest. "Grandma, I found this in your room. It has your initials." Margaret's expression softened instantly. She hurried over, her hands trembling as she recognized the box. "That's my legacy chest, Lily. It was given to me when I graduated law school, just as it was passed down to every Whitmore woman before me." They set the box on the bed. Lily's eyes widened at the intricate brass inlay decorating its lid. "What's inside?" "History," Margaret whispered, lifting the lid. Inside lay treasures that shimmered with meaning. Old photographs, handwritten letters tied with ribbon, antique jewelry, and documents that bore the weight of life-changing decisions. Margaret lifted a strand of pearls, luminous even in the morning light. "These belong to your great-great-grandmother Constance Whitmore. She wore them the day she signed the papers to purchase her first hotel after her husband abandoned her in 1923. By the time she passed, she owned 17 hotels across the Midwest." Lily reached out, touching the pearls with reverence. "Was she sad?" "Of course," Margaret said honestly, but sadness didn't stop her. She turned pain into power. Next came a simple gold wedding band. "This belonged to your great-grandmother Eleanor. She used her divorce settlement in the 1950s to build a communications company that funded generations of Whitmores." Finally, Margaret produced a velvet pouch. From it, she revealed a ring that seemed to capture the sunlight itself. A modest diamond, but set in a breathtaking Art Deco design. "This was Constance's engagement ring," Margaret explained. "Not from the husband who betrayed her, but from the man who came later. An architect who celebrated her strength. She waited until she knew her worth before she chose again." Clara studied the ring, struck by its elegance, while Lily gasped at the rainbow light scattering across the ceiling. "It's so beautiful," Clara whispered. "Beauty earned through adversity," Margaret corrected. "Each of these women refused to settle for less than they deserved. Their strength flows through us." At the bottom of the box, Lily discovered a small leather journal with blank pages. "What's this one for?" "That," Margaret said, smiling, "is for you. Every Whitmore woman writes her own story, her own victories. One day you'll add your words to this collection." Lily opened the first page, her little brow furrowed in thought. "Can I start now? I want to write about how we're taking care of each other." "That's the perfect beginning," Margaret said warmly. As Lily bent over the journal, purple pen in hand, Margaret's tone dropped to a sharper edge. "There's something else. I had Margaret Chen's team dig deeper into Ethan's accounts. The results are troubling. Transfers of money to Sabrina's design firm far beyond normal payment. Expenses for jewelry, clothing, luxury hotels, all on joint accounts. Clara, your income funded her indulgence as much as Ethan's." Clara's pulse quickened. "So it wasn't just betrayal. It was theft." "Exactly," Margaret said. "This isn't only adultery, it's financial misconduct. We can pursue this legally. It changes everything in court." Clara stared at the pearl still lying across her palm. For years she had thought her success diminished because Ethan never valued it. But now she saw it differently. Through Lily's eyes, through her mother's history, she understood. She had built more than structures. She had built a legacy, and Ethan had just given her the chance to protect it, with fire. The annual Boston Architecture Foundation Gala was the crown jewel of the city's cultural calendar, where the most influential minds in design gathered under one roof. This year, Clara Whitmore was set to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award, honoring a career that had reshaped Boston's skyline and brought international recognition to her work. Months earlier, she had dreamed of attending with her husband and daughter, proud as a family. Instead, she prepared to walk in with her mother and child as a woman betrayed, but not broken. Standing before the mirror in her bedroom, Clara hardly recognized herself. The silver gown flowed like liquid, its cut elegant yet commanding, chosen by Margaret to ensure Clara stood out. Around her neck rested a strand of pearls from the legacy box, glowing softly against her skin. On the bed, Lily twirled in a midnight blue version of her mother's dress, her hair pinned in a bun that made her look years older. Margaret emerged in royal blue silk, regal and confident, her presence commanding respect even without a judge's bench behind her. "We don't look like victims," Margaret said as she adjusted her earrings. "We look like queens." Together, they left in the waiting limousine. As they drove through the city, Lily pressed her face against the glass, marveling at the glowing skyline. "It's like the whole city dressed up for you, Mama," she whispered. At the entrance of the Art Institute, red carpet stretched beneath blinding flashes of photographers' cameras. Questions were shouted, speculation swirled, but Clara, Margaret, and Lily moved as one. 3 Whitmore women radiating strength. Inside, the great hall glittered with chandeliers and polished marble. Conversation stilled as they entered. "Mrs. Whitmore," greeted David Chen, the foundation's director, with visible relief. "We weren't sure you'd make it after your hospitalization. Boston is honored by your presence." "Nothing could keep me away," Clara said smoothly, her smile calm though her pulse raced. The evening unfolded in a whirl of polite congratulations, introductions, and whispers trailing in Clara's wake. Colleagues praised her projects. Students admired her legacy. But beneath the surface ran an undercurrent of curiosity. Everyone knew of Ethan's scandal. Everyone was waiting to see how Clara Whitmore would rise or fall. Then came the moment the crowd collectively shifted. Sabrina Hale had arrived. She swept into the hall in a white gown, her diamond earrings flashing under the chandeliers. Platinum hair pinned high, she moved with the self-assured grace of someone who believed she owned the room. Guests turned, whispering. Some looked toward Clara, others toward Sabrina. As though bracing for collision, Lily spotted her first. "There's the blonde lady," she whispered with unsettling calm. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "She's here for more than appearances. She's planning something." Clara's stomach twisted. Sabrina moved deliberately, positioning herself near the stage where Clara's award would be presented, her posture radiating confidence. She wasn't here to spectate. She was here to humiliate. Then Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, I have something." She held out Clara's phone. With quiet determination, she scrolled to a recording and pressed play. Sabrina's voice spilled from the speakers in a hushed tone. "This is almost too easy, Ethan. She's so pathetically grateful for every crumb you throw her way. Thank you for the roses, darling. Thank you for thinking of me while I was in the hospital. It's nauseating how little self-respect she has." Ethan's muffled reply followed, then Sabrina again. "Children adapt quickly, especially when the upgrade is me. Soon everyone will see I'm the woman who belongs at his side." Clara's breath caught. Lily had recorded this days ago while pretending to nap upstairs. Margaret's sharp gaze softened briefly with pride. "She just handed us our weapon," she whispered. As the program advanced toward the awards, the atmosphere shifted into a taut silence. The foundation director prepared to call Clara to the stage. Sabrina inched forward, her white gown blazing under the lights, poised to seize her moment. Margaret leaned close to Clara and Lily. "Sometimes the best way to stop an ambush is to launch one first." Lily's eyes widened, then she nodded with fearless certainty. "I'll do it." Moments later, David Chen's voice rang out, "Please welcome our final honoree, Clara Whitmore." Applause filled the hall as Clara stepped onto the stage, her mother and daughter following close behind. Guests murmured, astonished by the sight of 3 generations standing together. Clara took the microphone, her voice steady. "Thank you for this honor. Architecture builds more than structures. It builds legacies." She turned to Lily. "And sometimes legacies speak for themselves." Lily stepped forward, holding the phone. In the hush of the grand hall, Sabrina's recorded voice poured out, cruel and mocking. Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by shocked whispers. All eyes swung from the recording to Sabrina, who stood frozen, her composure cracking, her triumph dissolving under the weight of her own words. Margaret's gaze was sharp as glass. Clara's smile was calm, and Lily, barely 10 years old, had just dismantled the woman who tried to destroy her family. The hall erupted in applause. Not just for the award, but for the Whitmore women's unity. Sabrina fled the hall, her white dress vanishing through the doors as if chased by her own disgrace. And Clara, illuminated under the lights, stood not as a betrayed wife, but as a woman reborn. Sunlight streamed into the Whitmore estate's breakfast room, illuminating newspapers spread across the antique walnut table. Headlines screamed the story of the night before. The Boston Globe declared, "Architect exposes mistress at gala." The Herald went further, "Child's courage shatters socialite's scheme." On the society pages, photographs captured Clara, Margaret, and Lily standing together in their gowns, a united front that captivated the city. Margaret sat at the head of the table in her silk robe, glasses perched on her nose as she read aloud with satisfaction. "Listen to this. In 30 years of covering Boston's elite, I've never witnessed such grace under fire. The Whitmore women turned a public ambush into a triumph of dignity." Lily giggled, sticky with syrup as she studied her own photo at the podium. "I look so serious, Mama, like I was giving the most important speech ever." "You were," Clara said, her voice soft with pride. "You saved me." The memory of last night lingered. The applause had thundered. Sabrina's white gown had disappeared through the doors as whispers followed her like a trail of shame. Ethan had never shown his face, and now speculation about his absence filled every column. Margaret folded the paper with a snap. "The damage is done. Ethan and Sabrina are finished socially and legally. Our position is stronger than ever." The doorbell chimed. A delivery truck rumbled away as the butler carried in bouquets, roses, lilies, orchids, flowers spilling from tall vases and boxes stacked with envelopes. The foyer became a garden of gratitude. For the next hour, Clara, Margaret, and Lily read card after card. Colleagues congratulated Clara on her award. Professors from Boston University invited her to speak to architecture students. The Women in Design Society asked her to headline their annual conference. Even neighbors wrote heartfelt notes. Mrs. Patterson from next door sent wildflowers with a simple message. "Proud to live beside the strongest women in Boston." Lily clapped her hands. "It's like Christmas, but with flowers." Margaret organized the cards into neat stacks, her legal mind cataloging support. "These aren't just flowers," she observed. "They're opportunities, strategic alliances. People want to stand with us." Clara picked up a sleek envelope embossed with the crest of Harvard School of Design. Inside was an offer for a visiting professorship complete with a generous salary and flexible terms. She blinked in astonishment. This is everything I've ever wanted. Teaching, designing, building projects I believe in." Margaret's smile sharpened. "Success attracts success. Ethan thought betrayal would ruin you. Instead, it has elevated you." Lily held up another letter, her eyes wide. "Look, Mama, this one's from the Smithsonian. They want to include your cultural center project in their exhibition." Clara's hand shook as she read the invitation. The Smithsonian. Recognition at the national level. Her betrayal had turned into the very fire that pushed her into history. The phone rang again. Margaret answered crisply. "Whitmore residence. No, Ethan does not live here anymore. No, we are not taking calls from reporters." She hung up, calm as ever. "That's the 8th today. The story is everywhere, and the power, Clara, is now in your hands." Clara looked around the flower-filled room, at her mother's steady presence, at her daughter's bright eyes. The betrayal that nearly destroyed her had become the foundation of something unbreakable. Margaret poured more coffee, her voice level. This is not the end. This is the beginning. We must plan something beautiful. A statement that marks this as a new chapter, not the closing of an old one. Clara leaned back in her chair, inhaling the scent of roses and wildflowers, her chest lighter than it had felt in years. For the first time since her return from the hospital, she believed it. The Whitmore women had not been broken. They had been reborn. The Whitmore estate had always been magnificent, but for Clara it had become a hollow palace, poisoned by Ethan's betrayal. The marble floors, the soaring ceilings, even the scent of roses in the garden carried shadows of his lies. Yet Margaret insisted, "This house is not his, it is ours. We will strip it of his stain and make it shine brighter than ever." Over the following weeks, transformation began. Margaret called in trusted craftsmen, women Clara had mentored, and colleagues eager to help. Slowly, room by room, the estate became theirs again. The master bedroom was the first to change. Clara could not sleep beneath the canopy where she had once discovered Sabrina. With Lily's help, she stripped the bed to its bare frame. Together they carried out sheets and pillows and donated them away. In their place, Clara designed a new space, pale lavender walls, a custom headboard carved with geometric motifs, linen sheets chosen for comfort, not appearance. On the nightstand, Lily placed a glass jar of seashells they had collected from the Atlantic shore. "So you dream of the ocean instead of nightmares," she explained. Next came Ethan's study, once lined with books chosen for display rather than knowledge. Margaret directed movers to remove his leather chair and towering desk, sending them to storage. In their place, Clara installed a drafting table, her tools neatly arranged, rolls of paper stacked with precision. She claimed the room as her design studio, a command center for her reborn career. Even Lily insisted on change. She asked to paint her bedroom walls herself, rolling a bright sky blue color across the plaster. With every stroke, she hummed softly, transforming her space into a sanctuary untouched by betrayal. At the center, she placed the blank journal from the legacy box, now filled with her first entries. "Mama is strong, Grandma is fierce, and I am a Whitmore." The biggest change came in the Great Hall. Ethan's portraits, painted to showcase his vanity, were taken down. In their place, Clara hung black and white photographs of her greatest projects: the Cultural Center, the Riverwalk Pavilion, the library on Beacon Hill. Beneath each frame, a small plaque bore her name alone: Clara, Whitmore lead architect. Guests no longer entered Ethan's domain. They stepped into Clara's legacy. One evening, as renovations neared completion, Clara, Margaret, and Lily stood together in the hall, admiring the results. The air smelled of fresh paint and jasmine from the garden. The chandeliers sparkled, but now they illuminated a home infused with their spirit. "This house finally feels alive again," Clara whispered. Margaret slipped an arm around her daughter. "Because you reclaimed it. Ethan tried to turn it into his kingdom, instead you've made it your fortress." Lily hugged them both, her small arms bridging generations. "It's not just Mama's house, it's all of ours. A Whitmore house." Clara's throat tightened. For years she had believed her strength was tied to Ethan's approval. Now she saw the truth. The estate was no longer haunted by betrayal. It was reborn through resilience, a monument to survival, and a sanctuary for three women who refused to be broken. As they stood there, the Atlantic wind whispered through the garden, rattling the roses against the windows like applause. The Whitmores had reclaimed their home, and with it, their future. The conference room at Chen & Associates overlooked Boston Harbor, its wide windows reflecting the restless water below. Clara sat at one end of the long mahogany table, Margaret at her side, Lily quietly sketching in a notebook between them. Across from them sat Ethan Whitmore, his once polished appearance fraying at the edges, and his lawyer, a man who shuffled papers with forced calm. Sabrina Hale had not been invited, but her presence lingered in every accusation written on the document stacked neatly in front of them. The meeting began with clipped formalities. Ethan's lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore proposes an amicable settlement, division of assets, shared custody of Lily, and in exchange for Clara's discretion, a financial arrangement that protects the privacy of both parties. Clara kept her gaze steady. Privacy. Her voice carried across the table like steel wrapped in silk. After what my daughter recorded at the gala, after Sabrina's journal, which documents 6 months of deceit, privacy left the room the moment Ethan betrayed his vows. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Clara, please. I made mistakes, but dragging this through court will destroy all of us. Think of Lily. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Don't you dare use Lily as a shield. She already saw more than any child should. You underestimated her. You underestimated all of us. The lawyer attempted to redirect. Mrs. Whitmore, if this case proceeds publicly, it could damage reputations. It will damage his. Margaret cut in smoothly. Not hers. Clara's reputation has only grown stronger. The public admires her. She has offers from Harvard, from the Smithsonian, from the very people who matter. Meanwhile, Ethan's name is whispered as scandal, his mistress mocked in every column. We are not afraid of court. We welcome it. Clara slid a document across the table. Here are my terms. I retain full custody of Lily, with Ethan's visitation supervised until further notice. I keep sole ownership of the Whitmore estate, which was funded largely by my income. He will surrender his claim to my professional assets, including future earnings, in exchange for a fair division of joint accounts, and Sabrina's design firm will receive no further funding from Whitmore accounts, joint or personal. The lawyer read quickly, his forehead creasing. These terms are aggressive. They are fair, Margaret corrected. Aggressive would be pressing charges for financial misconduct, which we are prepared to do if necessary. Sabrina's lavish expenses came from Clara's accounts as much as Ethan's. That is fraud, and courts take fraud very seriously. Ethan finally snapped. Do you really want to destroy me, Clara? Clara's voice was quiet but unyielding. You destroyed yourself. I'm simply protecting my daughter and my legacy. Lily looked up from her sketch, her small voice clear. Daddy, you hurt us. Mama's not destroying you. You did that. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Ethan's face fell, the truth cutting deeper than any lawyer's words. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, then finally sighed. We'll need to review these terms, but I believe my client is prepared to accept most of them. Margaret gathered the papers, her tone final. Good, because these are not threats. They are the future. As the meeting ended, Ethan avoided Clara's eyes. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, a man who had once believed himself powerful, but now realized he had been outmatched, not by wealth but by women who carried something stronger than money. Clara rose, Lily's hand in hers, Margaret flanking her. Together they walked out into the harbor light, leaving Ethan behind in the shadow of his own undoing. For the first time, Clara felt the weight lifting. The battle was not entirely over, but the war had turned in her favor. The Whitmores were no longer defending themselves. They were writing the terms. The first snow of winter fell softly over Boston, dusting the Whitmore estate in white. Clara stood on the balcony outside her new studio, wrapped in a wool coat, watching the Atlantic stretch endlessly before her. Inside, the house no longer whispered of betrayal. It pulsed with life, laughter, and purpose. Margaret's voice echoed, down the hall, crisp and commanding as ever, though now it carried warmth instead of judgment. She was preparing to leave for Washington, where she would preside over a high-profile case. Yet she had promised Clara she would return every weekend. This family, she said that morning, is my most important case of all. Lily ran through the hallways, her laughter bouncing off the marble walls, her sketchbook under her arm. She had filled page after page with drawings of their new life. Clara standing tall in her drafting studio, Margaret with her gavel held, like a sword, and herself in the center, a little Whitmore girl with stars above her head. In the great hall, the portraits of Ethan were long gone. Instead, the walls told a different story. Black and white photographs of Whitmore women lined the panels, Constance with her pearls, Eleanor with her company logo, Margaret in her first courtroom, Clara at the gala podium with Lily at her side. A living legacy captured for generations to come. That evening, the three women gathered in the dining room for dinner. Candles flickered, casting golden light across the table. Margaret raised her glass of wine. To survival, she said. Clara lifted hers. To rebuilding. Lily clinked her glass of sparkling cider with theirs, her eyes shining. To us, to Whitmore's. The sound of their laughter carried into the night, warm against the cold. Later, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked softly, "Mama, are we happy again?" Clara brushed a curl from Lily's forehead and smiled. "Happier than ever, sweetheart, because we're free." After Lily drifted off, Clara returned to her studio. She unrolled the blueprint for her newest project, a women's shelter and cultural center on the edge of Boston Harbor, funded by grants and donations pouring in since the gala. At the top of the page, she had written the name, the Whitmore Center for Renewal. Margaret appeared in the doorway, watching silently. "It's beautiful," she said. Clara nodded, her voice calm but certain. "It's more than a building. It's a beginning." Through the window, snow continued to fall, blanketing the estate in silence. But inside, warmth glowed from every room, and the Whitmore women stood stronger than ever, reborn from betrayal, united by love, and ready for whatever storms might come. And as dawn crept across the horizon, painting the Atlantic in shades of gold, Clara Whitmore finally understood. Ethan's betrayal had not ended her story. It had written the prologue to the most powerful chapter of her life.